This month's series is dedicated to wellness and wisdom. And you're probably wondering why. Because so many of my successful CMO clients are currently reporting massive defections of their team members due to burnout, exhaustion, and better opportunities, all driven by the existential question, what do I really want? In addition, a lot of their team members are suffering from mental health challenges, and it's really affecting their bottom line and making them question their organization's purpose. So how can we manage the massive transitions happening all around us right now and help our stakeholders also manage through them? So there are three options that we all have, as you know, when it comes to transitions. You can either ignore them, you can fight them, or you can welcome them. And I believe that as marketers, wisdom offers a path to designing smoother life transitions, more engaged teams and customers, and better overall well-being. It takes practice and it takes time. And that's why I'm so pleased today that Chip Conley will be joining us for today's session on wisdom and marketing.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yes, I am 61 years old.
Yes, you are still a year older than me. Welcome.
I love the fact that we out ourselves on our ages. You know, this is part of the what's been proven by a Yale professor, Becca Levy, is that when you shift your mindset from negative to positive when it comes to aging, you get 7.4 years of additional life. So owning your age and owning your wisdom is part of what we're going to talk about today.
It sure is. And I just couldn't think of a better person because, as you know, we had you come and visit us here in the Washington, D.C. area when your book, Wisdom at Work, was released. And we had such a great time. And I was still in my 50s then. And we had such a wonderful conversation. And I wanted to bring you back now that all of us have had our wisdom put to the test. Because back then, you and I were not talking about the pandemic. So why don't we start with a common definition, Chip? How do you define wisdom now versus maybe how you defined it when your book came out 3 or so years ago?
You know, I think, so wisdom is very much about distilling experience. It's about, but I think that the big shift that I have seen is wisdom can be about distilling experience, but in a pandemic or in a time where social wellness, the idea of us being supportive to each other, how we share that wisdom becomes more and more important. And so wisdom that is not shared, you know, is like having a gift that you're not giving to someone else. And so I think that the pandemic has helped us to see that wisdom is not taught, it's shared. And that's part of the reason that our Modern Elder Academy is so relevant today, because having a collection of people sharing their wisdom and learning from each other is part of what we need today, because number one, it helps you not feel alone. But number two, it helps you learn something from someone else that you could apply in your own life.
Yes, and preparation for today, I was watching your interview at the Commonwealth Club with Brian Chesky.
Yes.
And back then, you defined wisdom as good judgment based on pattern recognition. Now, most of our viewers are CEOs and marketing executives. What makes it difficult for us to notice patterns? Where do you think we get stuck?
So the thing that's interesting, so pattern recognition, it's actually what machine learning is in technology. Artificial intelligence is pattern recognition and then adaptation. And yet when it comes to our own pattern recognition, it's often emotional intelligence. It's often, it's the intuition It's the pattern that I've seen this movie before, whether it's somebody you just met and you have a great impression of them or a terrible one based upon very limited information. Often there's something in it that's intuition based. Now it also could have judgment and prejudgment, and so you have to be careful of that as well. So, but what I would say is that is really important is to be able to learn how to try to feel that gut instinct, to understand what it is and where's it coming from. And so often when I have a gut instinct on someone or something, it feels like a pattern is being recognized. I try to dive a little deeper on it to make sure it's not just some trigger or a prejudice based upon a lack of information and based upon some past experience of mine. And so that's where discernment comes in. And that's where, frankly, wisdom is being able to discern the difference between pattern recognition based upon maybe prejudice. And I'm not just talking about racial prejudice or anything like that. I'm just saying prejudging something before it really should be judged versus the intuition that is so valuable in our lives because you're on the right path with your pattern recognition.
What patterns helped you during the pandemic to take the next leap and take your Modern Elder Academy from a single location now to multiple locations? What were those patterns?
So I one of the things that I have learned and then I've helped to teach Brian Chesky. So Brian is the co-founder and CEO of Airbnb. And when I joined Airbnb 9 years ago, I joined as his mentor, but also I was the head of global hospitality and strategy. So he was my boss. So my boss was 21 years younger than me. And my boss also was my mentee, which is an unusual relationship. So one of the things that I helped him to see is that when it comes to pattern recognition and wisdom, it's as I said earlier, it's important to make it conscious. So if you have an intuition, it's like, okay, how do I take that and make it conscious? And then how do you start making it actionable? So what we had to do here at the Modern Elder Academy, so I left, I'm still an advisor to Brian, and I went from 4 years of full-time to 4 years of strategic advisor work with the company. But here at MEA, at the Modern Elder Academy, we had to close down in March of 2020. And so we needed to find resilience first. So resilience buys you time and adaptability buys you a future. So the resilience was, okay, how do we keep our costs down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the wisdom was really about, okay, survival mode. But then we had to move quickly into the innovation mode. And that's a hard one to go from survival to innovation because they're different energies. One is very much about, okay, we're going to survive. And the other one's about really thinking bigger, curiosity about imagining possibilities that may not be obvious. So what we really did is we started to ask ourselves, well, how can we take this MEA program that's been so successful? We've had people from 28 countries come to Mexico, to our Baja campus on the beach, 2,000 alumni almost now. And how do we actually take that out to the world? And so we bought a ranch in Santa Fe, New Mexico to have a US location. We created an MEA online program so that we could take what we do here and make it accessible in an 8-week course. And then we actually retooled our campus, which is almost like a small luxury resort. And we turned it into what we call sabbatical sessions, where people come for extended stays, often as digital nomads. And they have a light amount of programming that's all optional. And those paths that we took have all been successful. So frankly, the pandemic, which looked like it was going to be existential crisis for us, turned into an enormous opportunity.
That's great. How is the Academy performing now? And how pleased are you with some of the shifts that you've made?
Well, the online program is huge. It's been very successful. It focuses on transitions, something that we're all going through right now, and very much has a wellness focus to it as well. The sabbatical sessions were full. We are completely full here right now, 25, 26 people on campus doing that. We start up with our workshops at the end of this month, and we have in the next few months a bunch of sold out workshops from including Michael Franti, the famous musician, Paul Hawken, the famous author and environmentalist, Lynn Twist, who wrote the book The Soul of Money, And so we have lots of workshops coming up after that. So the fact that our first 4 workshops are all sold out is a great sign. And then, yes, Santa Fe is exciting. We're going to have 2 locations there. So I guess, the hard part about it is it's very stressful. The process of going through the pandemic and then making pivots and making sure we're all on the same page about what's the right path is not an easy thing. And what it really requires is an enormous amount of psychological safety on a team to be willing to listen to dissident voices. There's a moment where you sort of feel like, I'm the captain of the ship. I got to just make the decisions. But doing that without actually tapping into some of the wisdom of the group, of our leadership team, would have potentially saved us, but actually long-term hurt us. So we really, and of course, and all of this was being done in a remote way because only a small fraction of us are actually down here on the Baja campus. Our leadership team is distributed not just in North America, but also on the European continent as well. So it took a lot of conversations.
Oh, I bet it did. And when you had a quote earlier that I want to make sure everyone captures, you started with, and a lot of this reminds me of what I read in your other best-selling book, Emotional Equations. You said resilience buys you time. And then what did you say? And
then I said adaptability buys you a future. So there's a lot of times adaptability buys you a future. So resilience gets all the attention. Resilience, it's about resilience, but resilience alone is like white knuckling it. It's like, we'll get through this. But if you are in the white knuckling phase, which is sometimes what you need to do to survive, that kind of energy is about is about marshaling resources, fight or flight. But to give the adaptability requires some creativity, some innovation, some spaciousness, some curiosity. So resilience buys you time. Adaptability buys you a future. And if there's a perfect example of this right now based upon my own life, it's Airbnb. I mean, Airbnb in May of 2020 was in an existential crisis, had to get rid of 25% of their employees, all of their contractors, had to get $2 billion in short-term loans to be able to survive. But today, based upon the earnings call that happened last night, Airbnb is worth more than Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, and Four Seasons combined. It's worth about $120 billion. Now, I joined that company 9 years ago. It was not worth $120 billion. It was a small tech startup in San Francisco. But what Brian did, my mentee did, is he went out and he learned resilience is the key in the short term. Adaptability is the key in the long term. And Airbnb changed its business strategy to focus on domestic travel, to focus on rural travel, non-urban travel, to focus on long-term stays. Today, almost 50% of the company's business is people staying 7 days or longer. That was not the case 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So, adaptability buys you the future. It's not all about resilience.
Oh, well, that was a very helpful distinction for all of us. And let's sprinkle that on top, since we're on the birthday celebration theme here. The sprinkles on top to the cake of being human that I would add would be more around the ability to stay curious. And you taught me many years ago when we first started collaborating on our respective books and other things, the power of all the work of Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck.
Yes.
And her growth mindset research and so forth, which we all need right now as we're going through all of these socio-political and career transitions. So I want to ask all of our people watching this from all over the world is to really ask yourself, how are you staying curious and teaching your teams resilience and adaptability? Because the more you can model it, the more it gives other people on your teams permission to do the same. So talk about being curious and being kind of ballsy. When you invited Marriott to come out to Airbnb. Okay. Now, all right. Is Fox, letting the fox into the hen house? I mean, what patterns did you see, or what curiosity were you fulfilling by bringing in Marriott to the Airbnb headquarters?
Well, yeah, I joined Airbnb, like I said, about 9 years ago. And when I first joined Airbnb, the whole hotel industry looked at me like, are you an idiot? That's a terrible idea. I was one of the first boutique hoteliers in the US with a company called Joie de Vivre based in San Francisco. And so I did know that Airbnb was going to grow big. And I also knew that one of the things we needed to do is build relationships with senior hotel leaders around the world. So Brian Chesky, the CEO, used to call me our Secretary of State. And so part of my job was to go and build bridges. And so it's hard to hate someone up close. So we invited Arne Sorensen, the late Arne Sorensen, who passed away not too long ago, and his senior leadership team from Marriott. We also invited Hilton and Starwood was not part of Marriott at that time, Intercontinental, Hyatt. We invited them all to come to our headquarters with the idea that we wanted to immerse them into some things that they would love to learn more about: millennial travel habits, digital nomads, data science, things that frankly the hotel industry was a little bit behind on. And so the intention was not to be the smart guys in the room, but it was more to just start a conversation about the fact that we're all in the travel business. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence that people who choose Airbnb also choose hotels. It depends on the purpose of the stay. And so it was a great way for us to, I think, create some diplomacy. So I think the wisdom there is if there are people who don't love you, figure out how you could make them love you without selling your soul. And in our case, the welcome mat was, hey, we'd love to have you come here, learn from us, because we're learning from you. And so maybe there's a mutual mentorship that could go on for both companies. And at the end of the day, Airbnb got very big and some of those big companies got upset. But generally speaking, the big corporate giants of the hospitality business ultimately were pretty friendly to Airbnb, more so than some of the convention and visitors bureaus or the smaller independent hotels.
What do you predict is the future of convention and visitors bureaus and traditional hotels? I'd love to hear your prognostications there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because some parts of the travel business are coming back in huge ways. Travel to nature-based domestic locations within 300 miles of where you live, that's huge now. Small group activities, especially leisure, family, friends, reunions, things like that, that's coming back big. Digital nomad travel, people who don't actually have a home or an apartment, they live on the road all the time, that's been big throughout the pandemic. The two pieces that I think are the most at risk in the hotel industry are convention travel, because we're moving in the direction of hybrid conventions where some of it's online, some of it's in person. So that might actually over time shrink the size of conventions so they're smaller. So a person, instead of going to Las Vegas or Chicago or Atlanta for a convention every year, they say, I'll go every other year. Well, that actually shrinks the demand, and that is not good for convention hotels or for convention cities. Secondly, business travel. So I think business travel is going to shift, and I will tell you, business travel has not come back, and like it used to be. And will it? That's the question. It won't. I don't think it'll come back in a big way in 2022. I think then the question will be, okay, so what kinds of business travel happen? And if you have a lot more remote workers than you used to have, you have to do offsite retreats with those remote workers so they can actually be in person with each other. It's hard to brainstorm, hard to be creative and full of innovation on a Zoom call. So the nature of business travel may change. But I would say you know, and the valuations on Wall Street show it. The big hotel companies are still struggling because their bread and butter business is those two areas: convention and meeting business, and individual business travelers.
Yes, and as we say, stay tuned. We just have to see what unfolds. I will tell you that in talking with CFOs and chief marketing officers, a lot of them are saying to me, we still want people to go to a conference, but instead of going to 5 conferences a year, they can go to 2 conferences a year, and they can zoom in for the rest of them, because we don't want to invest that much in travel and entertainment anymore. So hate to deliver that news to all of you who plan big conventions, but I think this pendulum swinging towards the smaller retreat centers, outdoor gatherings, and nature-driven outings will be something to keep an eye on. And you're on the vanguard of this anyway with your investments in these beautiful centers. One of the things I'm doing right now, Chip, pretty actively is I'm working with a lot of our clients on designing and deploying their offsite strategy sessions for 2022. Mm-hmm. And this exercise is really powerful because the teams I'm working with have no problem setting financial goals. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to setting the vision for the organization, the post-pandemic vision, they're struggling. They're having trouble. They get stuck, or they stop at, well, our vision is to grow 35% next year.
That's not a vision.
That's not a vision, folks. It's not a vision.
Peter Drucker was famous, and he also was a very curious soul. He would study a new topic every 2 years that had nothing to do with being a management theorist or author. And he wrote 40 books, but he wrote 2/3 of them after the age of 65. So his quote, "What business are you in?" is a really valuable one. I can consider it as part of your 2022 plan.
Yes. And remember, folks, you can download a lot of the tools and techniques that I use with clients and that I've been publishing as well. If you just go to my website, and I just uploaded a free questionnaire, a free quiz to help you be a wise and digital ready CMO. So just go to lisanirell.com and you'll find it there. We have free checklists and white papers and other things. So as we wrap up, Chip, you're already well into your 61st turn around the sun.
Yes.
What's in store for you in 2022, and what are you lit up about?
I'm really excited about the modern elder movement. I mean, we have now 25 regional chapters around the world of people who are on average 54 years old, but they're as young as 30 and as old as 88, who are cultivating and harvesting their wisdom and applying it in the workplace. And so I'm excited about that growth and the fact that we will be starting the design and construction of our first of 2 midlife wisdom schools in Santa Fe, New Mexico, called the Modern Elder Academy. So that's what I'm excited about.
I love that. And I want to also punctuate what you're saying. What I'm seeing with my best clients who are marketers and that they are focusing a lot of their energy and their funding on building those self-regulating communities. So Chip, I can expect, and I bet that you're not at the epicenter of all those communities. You are a catalyst for them, but That's you don't have to be present at every meeting. They're not, it's kind of like the same philosophy that Seth Godin has, where he says, look, there are all these people out there reading my books and applying lessons from Purple Cow and so forth. But he says, I don't want to be in the center of those conversations. Let those people learn and apply it the way they see fit. I don't need to be on stage, as the celebrity. He doesn't have to be the sage on the stage. He can just be, as you say, the guide on the side. So
and you move from being a can-do-it person, I do it all, to a conduit, and that's where I am. And yes, being a catalyst is one of my favorite words. So
yes. Oh, you are that. You are definitely that. Well, we want to say to you again how much I appreciate your being here.
thank you.
Every year, I think we just need to make this a tradition of having you come back, report back on the state of the wisdom economy and how we can become better and more wise marketers. So please come back and see us again soon.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you so much for joining our show today. If you'd like to continue to receive mindful marketing insights and invites, be sure to sign up at tinyurl.com/Lisa Nirell, or ring the bell to subscribe and receive notifications for our future live events and videos just like this on YouTube.